How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Apples and Genos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name's Josh Hutchinson. I've got John Binko with me here today. How you doing, John?
I'm great, brother. It's good to see you. Good morning.
Good to see you. Yeah, it's the morning today. We're drinking coffee. We're not drinking brewskis. We're getting an early start today. Um, I I I don't know if you noticed behind me, but it's not a computer generated living room this week. It's a little more blue. I just been doing a lot of painting this week, and I decided to paint our new rec room Maple Leafs blue for a nice little man cave. I don't know. What do you think, Binksy?
I think it's beautiful. When I got into the recording room, I was like, "Is my guy in the locker room right now? Like, what's going on?"
Yeah, that's the idea. I mentioned to you off mic, but the reason why I'm in such an awkward location is because we only have one outlet that works currently, because the electrician hasn't finished finishing all the outlets. So this is the only place where my laptop would go. So it's a little weirder. I'm like aimed almost towards the stairwell, but could be worse. I wanted to show off the new color.
I dig
All
it.
right, man. How you doing? What are you up to
I'm
today?
good. I'm good. Well, hanging out with you, and then headed into work for the raucous evening at my primary job, and um, waiting on Corbin Dallas to make these swing picks in best ball 2. I'm considering a goalie in the 7th round, so don't tell Nate, or do maybe tell him and then tag him, and then we'll just start a chain of gifts making fun of Nate. That'd be fun.
Yeah, man. I'm gonna tell him right now. Maybe.
Maybe.
All right. Well, speaking of work, you have another job that you went to yesterday.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk for our invasive question of the week. I wanted to talk about what you do on your commute to work now that you have a commute. What do you do? I know you kind of gave us a taste with the last question when we were talking about podcasts, but is there anything else that you do other than listen to podcasts on the way to work?
I mean, mostly it's podcasts. Occasionally I'll just drive in like decrepit silence. um, try and try and get my headspace right for hospitality work, etc. But if I'm not listening to a podcast, I listen to a talk radio station here in Dallas that for most of my life was a classic rock station. One that always like threw the best like concerts, etc. And in the last year, two guys who spent most of their time coming up in Dallas on radio, on sports networks, right? And they went out and bought the defunct 97.1 The Eagle and turned it into 97.1 The Freak. And they recruited like all of my favorite talk radio people. Like I've met them at remotes and waited on them in bars and etc. And the group of people that they brought in are just my favorite radio personalities. So if I'm not listening to a podcast, I've pretty much got it glued to 97.1 The Freak. And I hope that someday they see this and dub me and put it on the radio. That'd be awesome.
That's awesome. I don't have a very long commute anymore. I used to for quite a few years when I was going to school in Toronto. I used to commute in from Oshawa on the GO train, so that would be about an hour commute. And then for a little while, when I moved back to Trenton, Belleville area, I was still working in Oshawa, so that's that. So I was driving to work, and that was like an hour and a bit commute as well. So I also was a big podcast listener. I mean, I am a big podcast listener, but that was the time when I would typically listen to a lot of podcasts. But then also, like coming home after a night shift, it'd be just blasting old tunes, uh, either early 2000s pop punk,
Yeah.
or screamo, metal, emo stuff. Anything that I knew the words to, and I'd be rolling down my window, cranking a coffee at 7 in the morning, at trying to stay awake, and singing and screaming at the top of my lungs. So that is typically that's when I would work on my death metal growl is in the
Okay.
car, and exactly, and that's I mean, it was a good time. I kind of miss having that time in the car on the 401.
Speaking of 2000s pop punk, I have recently started like heavily listening to Cartel again, just
Oh,
out of
no
nowhere.
way! I
Yeah, I don't
love
know.
Cartel.
I heard a snippet in a TikTok or some short form video, and I was like, man, I haven't thought about Cartel in like 15 years,
Oh man, I
and
used
I've
to
just
love
been
Cartel.
burning through their catalog again.
That
It's great music.
Chroma, I think, is their first album,
Yeah,
right? That was a good
absolutely.
album. I like that one a
It
lot.
was. It was really good.
I'm gonna have to pull them up on Apple Music again. It's been a while. All right. Well, everyone, I know I did this last time, but stop right now. Stop what you're doing. Take a second. Leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It just takes a second. It helps us out a ton. We're trying to take this thing to new heights. Reviews go a long way. We would really appreciate it. And I mean, I don't. Whenever I hear this on the podcast, or whenever I get prompted to review something on my phone, I typically just ignore it, and that's really terrible. I should be reviewing things more. So if you review my podcast, I'll review your podcast. How about that? Sound like a
Well,
deal?
I mean, if you're talking to me specifically, I think that's a net sum, and I've already done it. I'm
Well,
the other way around. People are always like, like rate, subscribe, notify, and I'm like, I already did that. I already listened to you. And like, okay, you
I'm
got me.
I'm talking to anyone that's listening. If you got a podcast out there, or if you got an app that you've pulled together, send me a DM with your review for Apples and Ginos, and I'll review whatever you've done. I'll give you 5 stars. I don't care what it is.
You know what? I thought about this morning when I was having what I like to call me time, which is
Mhm.
my pseudonym for bathroom time. It's me time.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And I thought about this. I want to introduce a contest because I
Okay.
am the Jersey King, right? Or at
Yeah.
least I want to be anyway. Um, Throughout the season, for this upcoming season, including these shows that you're listening to, for the people that screenshot their reviews and send them to us, we will put you down for an entry, and I will buy you a jersey of my choosing
Ooh,
and
I
send
like
it
that.
to whoever the winner is. So keep in mind, it's of my choosing. So I may be really spiteful and like buy you your least favorite player of all time in the ugliest possible jersey. Um, but I love branding and hockey sweaters and minor league hockey and etc. Like my addiction is shopping on Facebook Marketplace and etc. As y'all can probably tell, and I want to show that love to our listeners. So for those of you that haven't reviewed for us, do that. Take a screenshot and send it to us, and we'll put you down for the season entry.
You heard it here first. We'll tweet it out as well. That's good. I like that. I didn't know that was coming, so that's perfect.
It happened today.
uh,
Serendipity.
fantastic. All right. Also, hop on in the Apples and Ginos Discord. We're having a lot of fun on there right now. Things are starting to heat back up again. We're doing best ball drafts, mock drafts. ADPs are out for fan tracks. Everyone's getting excited. Everyone's getting psyched. We're drafting. It's draft season, baby. Let's go. All right, let's get into the topic of the day. Today, we're going to be discussing the top 10 positive regression candidates for next season. We talked about negative regression last time. Now we're going glass half full. Now, by positive regression, I mean players that maybe had a down season or a disappointing year last year, but based on their underlying numbers, it's likely that they'll either bounce back or break out, or and they'll likely just positively regress towards their respective mean. So again, we're going to go backwards from 10, keep you in suspense. Number 10, Tanner Jeannot. So last season, Tanner Jeannot had just a brutal year offensively. He had 6 goals and 18 points And in his rookie year, he had 24 goals and 41 points. In his rookie season, he shot 19.35%, which is pretty high. I don't imagine that's probably his shooting percentage. He's kind of a third, fourth line guy. So I mean, I highly doubt that that's the type of shooting percentage you'd see from a guy like that. His on ice shooting percentage in his rookie year was 10.11%, which is actually fairly high for someone. Not super high, but a little high for someone who doesn't play on the power play at all and only plays on the third and fourth line. Typically, that's like closer to like 8-7% on average. His shooting percentage last season was down to 5.6%, so way down, just an abysmal shooting percentage. So I think he's likely much better than that. And his on ice shooting percentage was actually 7.61%, which is pretty low, but not, I mean, like I said, not super crazy for a third and fourth liner or a guy that's getting those type of minutes. His on ice shooting percentage was actually lower in Tampa Bay, 5.1%, and that's low no matter what situation you're in. His time on ice was actually down in Nashville last year. He had 15.59 in his rookie season, down to 15.05 last year. But in Tampa, it was down to 11.54. So really quite ugly there in terms of time on ice and opportunity. His underlying shot rates were up from last year in Nashville, but actually hit an all-time low once he got back to Tampa Bay. So you might be saying, Josh, what's the positive spin on this situation? And I mean, the positive regression is probably going to depend on how and how much Tampa Bay uses him in their lineup. I'm willing to bet, because of the capital that they gave up to get Tanner Jeannot, that they're going to use him quite a bit. Like, I think his ice time is going to go up from 12 minutes a night. He'll probably play on the third line, but may even get an opportunity a little bit higher in the lineup. They're not as deep on the wing anymore in Tampa, so he's a guy that could get an opportunity potentially on the second line with a Cirelli, maybe a Brandon Hagel, maybe even a Steven Stamkos. They don't have Ross Colton anymore. They don't have Alex Killorn anymore. So there is more opportunity on the left side. So I think they're going to give him some opportunity there. And I mean, there's nowhere to go from those numbers. There's no way he's a 5% shooting percentage player, or his on ice shooting percentage will not stay at 5%. So I like Jeannot's chances of at least getting back to a reasonable point total to kind of entice you into picking him, along with his amazing peripherals, his near league leading hit totals. What do you think about Tanner Jeannot going into next year, Binksy?
I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a sincere possibility that he plays on that second line, whether it's with Hagel or whether they move Stamkos around. I think there's a real possibility that he gets onto that top PK, right? So
Yeah.
there's certainly plenty of room for improvement in time on ice. I mean, sub 12 minutes is scary, and that's not like a really limited sample either. That's in 20 games, which is a quarter of the season, right? Like he had ample time to get going, but as we know, that's in a new place, in a new situation. So I think there's certainly a lot of room for growth, but we're talking about, 2 full seasons of him shooting at sub 6%. So the idea that he is offensively talented, like we saw glimmers of in that, like, I guess you could call it a breakout season in Nashville, right? Like he shot almost 20% and still only had 41 points that year. So like you, I have a little bit of concern, but I think the opportunity there is very high. Like you said, they moved out 2 players that would be eating into his minutes like they did at the end of the season. And Tampa spent a lot. They spent a laughable amount to bring him in. So the idea that they brought him in and then they're going to slot him in behind Connor Sheary it seems like dubious at best. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So the runway for him is going to be pretty long, and we have seen him have flashes of offensive prowess. So I believe a little bit. I am concerned that the ceiling on that opportunity is a little bit lower than we would hope. I'm definitely not going to be reaching for him, but there's a lot of room for growth, and I think it's almost a given that there's going to be significant positive regression, but how far that takes you, probably not 5 picks worth, right? 5 picks worth.
Yeah. I
So
think it was 5. I think it was 5 and Kale foot.
yeah.
So
So
basically 6.
yeah, I mean that's a lot. I don't know if it's that much, but there's definitely positive regression coming. I think he could stand to be a little bit higher on this list for sure.
Yeah. Number 9, Brian Rust. He had 20 goals, 26 assists, 46 points last year after a 33 goal, 79-point pace in 60 games the previous year. His shots per 60, individual Corsi 4 per 60, and individual scoring chances 4 per 60 all took dips from the previous year, but they were still pretty great numbers. Um, and they were actually all the second best numbers of his career. So better than any year prior to the last two. And his individual scoring chances 4 per 60 was still above 10 last year, which is that's kind of a target number. That's a number that Nate likes to look at when looking at underlying numbers. And when it's above 10, that's really, really good. Um, his most glaring statistics were his 9.48 shooting percentage. He's typically closer to 13 to 14%, so that could stand to increase next year. And his career average is 12.3, but I mean, most commonly he had years where he was in the 13 to 14% range. And his on-ice shooting percentage was 8.96, which is crazy because he did spend time on power play 1 in Pittsburgh last year. I mean, he kind of got replaced by the end of the season by Rickard Rakell. That is a spot where he could come back to. It's possible, especially with injury. Like, I think he's one of the next guys that could appear on power play 1. So I mean, I'm pretty sure that Brian Rust is going to have a bounce back season next year. He's still generating a ton, even though he was slumping. And those numbers have got to come up. Like, those are both insanely low numbers, and really unsustainably bad. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely think he's going to have a bounce back season. So what do you think about that? I think he's going to actually be a really nice value pickup because he's going really late in drafts right now, and I think he probably will just because people aren't as stoked about Brian Rust. So I think you could get him at value pretty easily this year.
I completely agree with that. The idea that over a season that Rickard Rakell is going to like firmly supplant him on the top line doesn't really track to me, right? Like a line with Gensel and Crosby and Rust seems a lot better to me, sincerely, than the opposite with Raquel playing with Riley Smith and Malkin, right? Like, who are no slouches in their own regard. Like, even if it stays the way that it's forecasted to be right now, Gensel's going to take a minute. There's going to be some shuffling, but in the end, I feel like Russ returns to form, takes over on the top line, perhaps plays top power play, perhaps not. But either way, you're going to be able to draft him at value. The metrics really, really indicate that things should round back into form. And we said that for the entirety of last season. And it didn't really seem to be health concerns, right? Played 81 games. He was still out there hitting. Things just didn't break right for the Penguins last year, and they have reloaded. They have stayed committed to the players on their team. Like, I feel like everything is due for a bounce back. I don't so much believe in the Penguins in general, but in a fantasy setting, I think you're going to get phenomenal value for Rust after what was very much a down season. And, we're talking about 3 to 4 shooting percentage room for growth. And that's very, very achievable for somebody who many times has been over 13%. So plenty of shots on the season. I'm a little bit concerned about the time on ice, but even at low points, very respectable 18 minutes for him last year. So if there's any more room that he gets from that, whether it be from injury or lineup slotting or et cetera, like there's certainly the ability to go up, and I'm all about it. Like I think it's certainly possible that he has an excellent season for you at an excellent value in your drafts for sure. I think we lost Josh. Going to move on next on the list. Number 8, Sam Bennett, 21 goal and 52-point pace after a previous 28 goal and 57-point pace the year before. Not a huge dip, but the potential for a pop is certainly there and large. This previous season, 8.3 shooting percentage with a career average of 10. So room for improvement, but not significant improvement in that regard. On ice shooting percentage, 8.61 was the worst for him since joining Florida. They were very much snake bitten as a team, and with exception to Carter Verhaeghe, had down years across the board. Second highest ice time of his career at 17.24. Slight dips for his individual rate stats. The shots per 60, 10.56 down from 12. Individual Corsi 4 per 60, 17.56 down from almost 20. His individual scoring chances 4 per 60, 11.43 down from almost 13. And those numbers still monstrous, still very impressive. So even with the downtick, you're not really concerned that things have cratered, but there is room for him to move back up into those marks. We're still waiting for a true offensive breakout from Sam Bennett. I feel like we can say that every single year, but if he can stay healthy, he as well as the team can and should convert more efficiently. And I feel like he should probably reach new heights. It's always a tale of two Sams in Florida. So, make your assertions about who you want to target in the draft between those two. But the underlying statistics lean a little bit heavier on Sam Bennett for me. And Florida just should convert more, right? They should gel better. They should be scoring more often. And Sam Bennett is a prime candidate to do that. Josh says his internet went down. He's going to keep plugging away at it, restart the engine, and see where we go from there. I'm going to move on into the list. Number 7, the other side of the tale of two Sams, Sam Reinhart, with 31 goals and 67 assists after a previous 33 goals and 82 points the year before. So you're seeing a pattern here where it's down from the previous season, as you would probably expect with the way that they had success in that 2 seasons ago. Shooting percentage 1366, down from 17 the year before. The career average is 14. So last year's number is actually more reasonable for him. The ice time went up by 2 minutes a game, hit 1946, and the shots per 60, individual Corsi 4 and individual scoring chances 4 per 60, all career highs. So even with the regression to the mean in shooting percentage, his goal totals didn't change that much. The big difference came with assists. You're going to be directly pointing to Matty Tkachuk, to Verhaeghe, even to Duclair upon his return in that regard. His on-ice shooting percentage, only 10-10, despite great deployment and power play one time. If he gets that same deployment and Florida becomes more efficient in shooting, they were bottom third in the league in team shooting percentage last year. He can get back to point per game. If he can get back to point per game, you're going to get immense value from him. Personally, I feel a little bit better in my draft rooms going after Bennett than Sam Reinhart, but both of these guys have offensive prowess. They're in an offense that is going to showcase them and work them. And both of them, after a dip, should return to the mean in a meaningful way, as should the rest of the Panthers. Number 6 on our list, Vladimir Tarasenko, a 21 goal, 38 assist, 59-point pace after 34 goals and 82 points the previous year. In St. Louis, his shooting percentage was 9.71, a dismal second lowest of his career. In New York, back up to an average 12-12 in shooting. Wasn't shooting the puck as much. Shots per 60 and individual Corsi 4 per 60 were low for him, but his individual scoring chances 4 per 60 was still above 10 in both New York and St. Louis. The time on ice in New York was below 16 minutes, but I think we all really expected that given the glut of talent and veteran leadership for them. They made serious deals to try and plug and play some all-stars into their lineup, and it didn't necessarily work, but it wasn't terrible, right? In the new situation, you can pretty much expect him to be playing power play minutes. There's, I don't know if I would call it a glut of talent around him, but he's going to be playing above Batherson, who still has question marks. He's going to be playing above Kubalik. There's not really anyone that's coming for his spot on the wing in Ottawa. And I think it would be laughable to not have him on power play 1 in Ottawa. So there's a new situation for him, a little bit of concern about him moving to another team again, but I feel better about the situation for him in Ottawa than in New York. Y'all, Josh is back with us on the broadcast. Hello.
What's up, guys? I don't know what the hell happened there. That was very bizarre. My internet just randomly decided not to work for 10 minutes. So, but I'm here. You're talking about Tarasenko now, hey?
Yeah, I went through the stat rundowns for the two Sams and Vladimir Tarasenko. So before we
Okay.
move on, let's talk about it in a capsule between the two Sams.
Okay,
Um,
sure.
as,
Uh,
as a general rule, the team should be quite a bit better in their conversions this year.
mhm.
Obviously the draft capital that you're going to have to spend on the two Sams is a little bit disparate, but what do you think? Tell me what you're thinking about the Sams in Florida.
Yeah, I think Sam Reinhart first the year before this past season. So when Florida was the best team in the league, he had 82 points. Was a point per game. I don't know that he's quite that player. He's close to it. But yeah, I think there will be pretty significant positive regression. I think, yeah, like you said, Florida as a team is just going to convert better next year. We've seen that they can in the playoffs and that playoff run. It really, really kind of bounced back in the opposite direction for them in the playoffs. It seemed like they were scoring at will. Yeah, I think Sam Reinhart will probably play on that top power play, I think there. I think he will get better. You'll get him probably at a discount in the draft, like you said. Sam Bennett, still waiting for him to pop. I still like. I'm not 100% sure if it's there. His shooting percentage, he may just be kind of a low shooting percentage player, like similar to Brady Tkachuk, like around a 10%. But even so, his shooting percentage was low this past year compared to normal. And then on ice shooting percentage is just 8.6% is crazy for someone playing in the top 6. So I think that will definitely come up. Yeah, I mean, I think for Florida it's a team thing, but these guys are both guys that under the hood looked still very, very good last year, despite having a dip in points. So I like them both going into next year. Sam Bennett obviously has the peripheral advantage as well that kind of gives him a little bit more value. So I like them both, and I like them both as potential value picks.
Are you at all concerned about Anton Lindell in Sam Bennett's regard? Like, I know they move things around. in that lineup with Evan Rodriguez coming in. Daily Faceoff currently has Rodriguez, Barkov, and Reinhardt as line one, I guess with quotations on it, right?
Okay.
And Verhage and Bennett and Kachuk as that second line. That seems more like a first line to me. I imagine the minutes will be almost bang on for either of those lines, but what in your mind is that top six? Is it Verhage, Barkov, and Kachuk? Is it Rodriguez, Barkov, and Kachuk? Is it Verhage and Bennett and Reinhardt on a line, and Rodriguez and Barkov and Kachuk on a line? Do you think they're like glued to splitting Barkov and Kachuk? What does that look like in your mind when you imagine what they should do after a down year conversion wise, and then the playoff run?
Yeah, I guess. Well, here's the thing: like with the success in the playoffs, I imagine that there probably isn't going to be a massive change, because it seemed like, um, well, Verhage, first of all, I see him probably playing with Barkov because that's kind of where he sat 5-on-5, um, for a good chunk of the year, and I believe in the playoffs as well.
Yeah.
So I see Verhage there. Duclair was on the other wing, I believe. So I could see Rodriguez slotting in there. So I imagine Verhage, Barkov, Rodriguez is probably what you're looking at, and then maybe Bennett, Reinhardt, and Kachuk, as a second line, which I really like. I like that a lot. That is disgustingly good. Like that has the potential to be a top, like a top five line in the NHL next year. So, yeah, I think that, um, yeah, no, I think that's probably how the top six shakes out. I'm not really concerned about Lundell yet. He didn't really do a whole lot last year in terms of conversion. So I don't imagine that Paul Maurice is probably in a huge rush to put him in the top six.
It definitely
He
seemed like he was shaking things up just to shake things up at that point in the season for them.
Yeah, that being said, Reinhardt has had success playing with Lindell 505, so there could be a situation where, they're playing together on the third line and they try and split things up even more and spread the wealth even more. But I don't know. I feel like the top six, there's a little bit less depth at forward, uh, going into next year, it seems. So I think I imagine they're probably going to stack that top six and then maybe just have kind of a rough and tumble, bottom six. But I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But that's what I see for Florida at this point.
Okay. Well, before we move into Tarasenko, if you had to pick a Sam at their general value in drafts, which one are you going for? Are you going to wait on Bennett or are you going to move on Reinhardt?
I'm probably. I mean, that's an interesting question because Reinhardt obviously is going to go a little higher. I think you're both going to get them at fairly nice value. Sam Bennett, to me, is very interesting because, if you like to employ the strategy like I do, with fading centers, he's going to be in a pretty interesting spot. He's going to be available probably after pick 100, which is around the time where you're probably going to start thinking about picking centers if you haven't loaded up on them already. So he's an interesting option there. So I think I might go with Sam Bennett. Um, just at value. Like I'm not saying I obviously would take Reinhardt over Bennett in terms of like just overall production, but I think at the value that Bennett is probably being picked, I'd probably go with him.
I dig it. I'm in line with that.
All right.
So I touched on the stats for Vladimir Tarasenko, but tell me how you feel about the new team situation. Are you like really hyped for it? Are you like back on the idea that Ottawa is an up and coming formidable team, or are you a little bit more concerned about his replacing DeBrincat than the emotion behind him finding a spot after being glued to St. Louis all this time?
Yeah, I think, with Tarasenko, so I put him on this list actually before he signed in Ottawa. Like I did these notes quite a while ago, but I still think that he'll bounce back. I do have some concerns about the fact that I don't think that he's going to get power play one time, which is
Really?
probably going to be an issue. Like I see Ottawa loading up that top power play. I mean, obviously, if they split time, kind of like he did in New York, I think there's enough talent to go around that he'll still play with some pretty good players on whatever unit he's on. But that just means he has less power play time than he would if he was on a loaded up power play. So not an ideal situation, but he is kind of more of a 5v5 producer. I see him. I mean, it looks like he's probably going to play with Norris and Batherson, which is very interesting. Because I don't imagine you split up the Stützle, Giroux, Kachuk. Was that what the top line was? Now I'm not 100% sure. I'm second guessing myself, but yeah, I mean, either way, no matter who he plays with in the top six, he's playing with quality players. So I think there will be a bounce back for him. I don't think there's a super high ceiling. Like I think point per game is his ceiling in general as a player. So
Yeah.
he's probably not going to reach that. I could see him getting over 70 points. But I don't know. We'll see what happens there. I'm not as excited about Tarasenko as I was when I started making these notes. I'll put it that way.
Really? Because I would just kind of assume that him going to Ottawa would make you feel better about his prospects on the season. But I mean, I think you're absolutely right. We're generally not talking about a point per game player, right? Like usually 5 to 10 points under that. And in those seasons where he was hitting that high water mark, he was having the highest shooting percentage of his career and highest shot totals of his career. So yeah, I think maybe the name and the reputation precedes him a bit. And in your drafts with the excitement of him finally finding a home in Ottawa is going to lead him to be a little bit overdrafted. I think the chance of you getting a value on Tarasenko is a little bit low, and it feels to me like you're going to end up disappointed having drafted Tarasenko, expecting a point per game level player with the name that kind of carries that weight, but the actual production hasn't really hit that. So, and we're talking about a player who again is in a new town, having to acclimate to a new situation, and as much flux as there was for the Senators last year, and Norris coming back into the fold, and question marks about Batherson. There's a lot of like cloudy information as to what you're going to try and make a read on, and it's really tough. Like there's some players in Ottawa that I am very interested in drafting, and Tarasenko isn't one of them for me. But with that said, I think the spot on the list is absolutely right. Like it was a down season for him for a variety of reasons last year, and um, a return to his form seems very, very likely. It's definitely a better situation for him than it was in St. Louis, and for very different reasons than it was in New York. But temper your expectations as a fantasy manager in and really review what Tarasenko has given you throughout the years, and don't draft on name brand alone.
100%. Yeah, I agree with that. All right, let's move into number 5, Evgeny Kuznetsov. This is probably a surprising one for some people. It was a surprising one for me when I looked at the numbers, to be frank. He had 12 goals and 43 assists, 55 points last year. He's typically a 70 to 80 point scorer in general. His shooting percentage last year was 6.98%, which is the lowest of his career by far. It wasn't even close. He actually has a career shooting percentage of 11.2%. So that's a pretty big jump, about a 4% dip last year from his career average. He had a 10.81% on ice shooting percentage, which is also the lowest of his career. Now, that is partially due to him getting bumped off of power play one at times. So I think that was a pretty big factor. Also, wasn't always playing with Ovechkin, so that
Mhm.
obviously is another issue last year. His time on ice was down for the previous year, but it's still pretty reasonable for Kuznetsov. It was 1803. His underlying individual stats were pretty normal for him. He's not really a big shot and chance generation guy. He's kind of more of a playmaker. But I think that he's going to have a huge bounce back. Like I think just based on those numbers, I think he is going to get better. I think Washington as a team is going to be a little bit better this year. Needs to get back on that top power play for sure. But they have a new coach. It's a new situation. I imagine that him and Ovechkin probably want to play together again. So I would not be surprised to see him back on PP1 and back on the top line next year, and then back to Evgeny Kuznetsov numbers. He's not going to shoot 7% again this year, that's for sure. So, what is your feeling on Kuzi?
Well, I mean, I have questions about what Washington actually looks like, right? Backstrom adamant that he's going to continue his career, but extremely rough road recently. The same thing is true um, for Max Pacioretty. So I think it's really kind of a given that Kuznetsov plays alongside Ovechkin and Tom Wilson, and they get the band back together in one of the worst terminologies out there. And the top six, in theory, should be better if they get Patches in a decent timeline. If Backstrom is able to continue and return to form, and the same thing for TJ Oshie. There's a lot of question marks. There's a lot of health concerns, and to a certain extent, there's some age concerns out there as well. So I'm a little bit scared of drafting that tier of player from the team, but Kuznetsov himself should have a much better season. That was absolutely a down year for him, right? Most seasons, 70 to 80 points, shoots above 12%, right? So he should be better. He had an extremely down year in terms of stats and emotion, right? There was a lot of rub between him and the organization, and what he thought he deserved, and playing time, and who he was supposed to be playing with, and all of that. And at least in the press circuit that he's been on, and talking about Ovechkin, it seems like he's reinvested, right? It seems like he's on better terms, just kind of outwardly. So I have hopes, narrative wise, that things are going to be better. If the other players in that top six don't work out health wise, it's a given that he's on the top power play. It should be him on the power play above Backstrom regardless, but we'll see what happens with that. Anytime that you're getting a player attached to Ovechkin, it should be, all systems go, right? So I have a few concerns based on things just kind of being hidden, right? Like what actually is going to happen for them as the season gets started, and how they choose to go about it. But I don't really have concerns specifically about Kuznetsov. And, again, we're talking about a center that's going to go in that level of draft where if you mapped your roster out that way and you chose to wait on the glut of this tier of center, I think he's absolutely one that you can draft with confidence that he's going to return to form.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say the same thing. Number 4 is Brad Marchand. He had 24 goals, or actually, he had a 24 goal, 52 assists, 76-point pace last year. He missed a bit of time at the start of the year after offseason surgery. He had the lowest IPP of his career, 64%. It's usually closer to 75%. So that's a pretty big dip for him. And the lowest shooting percentage of his career at 11.48%. His career average is actually 15.4%. So he's a pretty high efficiency shooter. he also had his lowest point pace since 2016, which is right around the time when he started playing on the top line with Patrice Bergeron after that World Cup of Hockey, where he played with Bergeron and Crosby, and everyone was like, Brad Marchand on the top line, what is this? And then all of a sudden he just popped and was like this amazing top 10 player in the NHL. So that was his worst season since then, since he really has come out as a premium player in the league. His time on ice was 1831, which is slightly low for him, but not crazy. Shots per 60, individual Corsi 4 per 60, and individual scoring chances 4 per 60 were all down from the previous year, but the numbers weren't out of the ordinary for him. And again, like I mentioned before, with a previous player, individual scoring chances 4 per 60 were just under 10, so right around 10. So still pretty nice underlying numbers for Marchand. I think he's going to have a bounce back year. I don't see signs of age related decline in any of these numbers. I think coming back from major surgery, especially the surgery he had, I believe it was hip surgery, can be difficult. He came back pretty quick, like quicker than expected.
And yeah, he was a huge value last year in drafts based on that injury, and I think he missed like
he only missed a month. Yeah, it wasn't that long. Yeah, it was. He still played nearly 70 games, I believe. So, I think. I mean, there are issues in Boston. Obviously, their center depth is quite poor. So we don't know who he's going to be playing with right now. It looks like Pavel Zacha could potentially play with Pastrnak again. We'll see. I don't know if they're going to load up that top line. But if he doesn't play with Pastrnak, he's probably playing with Jake DeBrusk, who he's had success with. And then he'll play on the power play with Pastrnak. So, I mean, I feel like he's going to bounce back. I think he's still got some gas left in the tank. And I mean, we're really going to see whether he needs Bergeron because we haven't seen him without Bergeron in years, like about 8 years. So, I mean, yeah, I guess it remains to be seen if he can do it himself. But I think there is still enough wing depth on Boston, and their power play is still going to be solid. So I like Marchand going into next year. What about you, man?
Positive regression doesn't really seem in the cards for me the way that they've had the exodus in Boston. Like, in the back of my mind, my hope is that he plays alongside Pastrnak, but I feel like that eats into his offensive output, right? So I feel like 70 plus games, right around 70 points is kind of what I expect from him, right? He'll get slightly more time on ice, he'll shoot slightly better, but the output of the team, I mean, we can't reasonably expect them to have the season that they did last year. So, in that incredible run that they had, where he only missed 9 games, and one of those, at least one of them, was a healthy scratch at the end of the season. I feel like this is probably what we should expect from the current state of the Bruins. So, I like him, but I don't see a ton of positive regression coming. I think this is kind of probably what we should expect, which is not bad, but you're probably going to have to pay a higher premium for his name and the success of the team as a whole in last year's season. So I'm a little bit wary of drafting him for my squads, but I don't think it's going to be bad. I don't think it's just going to fall off a cliff, but I don't really expect it to be what it was the year before, where he played 70 games and got 80 points, right? I think it's around 70 games, slightly more, and around 70 points, maybe slightly more. Like, not terrible, but I don't expect it to jump up to, something like 3-4 seasons ago.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I do still think that there is going to be some positive regression just based on shooting percentage. But yeah, like I think those are fair points. But yeah, again, like I don't see age-related decline in the underlying numbers really. So even though he was dealing with injury, he was still kind of doing Brad Marchand things. So he was a bit snake bit at times during the year, and I mean that's pretty much it. So I mean
Yeah,
this is
and
a guy that 2 years ago was being drafted in the first round in fantasy leagues, and he's now going in like the fifth, sixth area. So could potentially be great value, even if he brings you third round production. I think he still could be a value pick there. Number 3 is Taylor Hall. Taylor Hall had a 22 goal, 27 assist, 49-point pace in 61 games last year. He had a bit of injury troubles, as he typically does. He had the lowest time on ice of his career at 1555. He had a slight decline in shots per 16 individual, Corsi 4 per 60 since his New Jersey days, but I mean, pretty steady in terms of his numbers in Arizona and Boston. So he's at kind of a different stage of his career. He's not at the peak like Hart Trophy Taylor Hall, but he's still. I mean, it's not as if last year was a huge dip in terms of underlying numbers. His individual scoring chances for per 60 was actually 10.5, which is his best since 2018, which is when he won the Hart Trophy in New Jersey. So still getting in those areas, despite I mean, at times playing on the third line in Boston last year and not getting a ton of ice time. So that's a number that really stands out to me. That 10.5 individual scoring chance for per 60. His 10.67% shooting percentage was pretty much normal for career average, but his on ice shooting percentage was 9.93%, which is one of the worst years of his career, and likely due to, I mean, lack of power play time and playing lower in the lineup, playing in the bottom six at times, like I just mentioned. So I imagine now that he's playing in Chicago, he's going to play on that top line. He's going to play with Connor Bedard. He's going to be mentoring him, 2 former first overall picks. And I just feel like it's a match made in heaven. I also feel like his time on ice is going to go way back up. So obviously there could just be an increase in numbers due to that. But then also, I mean, his underlying numbers still look good. So I mean, I feel like his point totals are going to go up next year. No question. I don't think anyone's questioning that, but I could see him being a 60, 70 point guy next year with Connor Bedard. So what are your thoughts on that, Binksy?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much a given that those point totals go up. There has to be a giant jump in time on ice. How high that goes, it's hard to say, right? Like they don't have a whole lot to play for to overwork him. Like he is going to be a top player for them, and that seems like 19 minutes, right? It doesn't never really been above a 20 minute average time on ice player throughout his career. Like he really kind of settled in the pocket in the meat of his career at about 19 plus. So I feel like they're going to lose a lot. I feel like they're going to get 1 to 2 goals, and all of those points are going to be dependent on him and Bedard and Jones. And I am a little bit more hesitant than most to just crown Bedard the next coming of McJesus, right? Like I want to see it in the NHL before I believe, and it's hard for me to just jump in line with that. Like clearly positive regression is coming. Like he's just going to get all of the opportunity in the world, and it was a really really down season for him stat output wise, even though the team success had a lot to do with him being on that line and bringing that level of talent to that line was really important. But even the time on ice skyrocketing is going to be like 3 minutes. and that's significant, but it's not going to be just a glut. He's not going to play 21 minutes. He's not going to play 20 and a half minutes. And if he does, I'll be completely shocked. So it would take that kind of jump, like 4.5 minutes more, for me to really believe in it being like an important um, change in output. So yeah, I mean, I see 65 points being doable. I think he'll be like a viable fantasy player for you, but man, I just don't believe yet in Chicago, like even in terms of fantasy. I see Bedard going way earlier than I would consider it. And man, I don't know. I don't believe in the possibility that they're gonna have like any sort of positive notes coming out of Chicago. Like I think it's going to be just an absolute just poop storm for them. And like how bad does it get if they like Bedard has a nagging injury and they just shut it down? Like who is he playing with at that point? What's his name? Journeyman played all those years in Anaheim. Corey Perry.
Corey
Like I
Perry.
blame
Yeah.
Corey Perry. The curse of Corey Perry is real. So
Yeah, we'll
I don't
see.
I don't believe. I don't believe. I think Taylor Hall is might be collecting a paycheck at this point.
We will see. We'll see. I feel like it is going to be a poop storm, but it's going to be a poop storm with some high points.
Okay.
That's how I feel about Chicago's year next year. There's hope. All right, number 2 is Johnny Gaudreau. 21 goals, 53 assists, and 74 points last year, which actually is not that bad considering how bad and injured Columbus was. Like he was really the only significant player that played the full season in Columbus. So he was on an island by himself most of the year and still managed to get 74 points, like just below point per game. So I mean, obviously he was down from 40 goals and 115 points the year before. His shooting percentage was the second lowest of his career at 9.55%. He's had the odd down year, but it's not crazy. But like, it's not super crazy for him to shoot as high as 15% in a season. Like that's happened a few times. His
Mhm.
career average is 12.5%. He's one of those weird players. I think Binksy mentioned something like that on the last episode when we were talking about Ryan Nugent Hopkins. Similar situation where you don't really know what his shooting percentage is going to be year to year. It's kind of all over the place. Gaudreau is another one of those guys, but 9.55 is very low for him. His IPP was 75%, which is pretty normal for him, so not crazy. On ice shooting percentage was 10.32, which is a little low, especially for someone who plays on power play 1 regularly. Like you'd expect it to be closer to like 12%. So that could stand to increase and probably will if Columbus is more healthy next year. He also had a decrease in shots per 60, individual Corsi 4 per 60, individual scoring chances 4 per 60. It was those numbers were a little closer to his career averages. The year before in Calgary, he actually had a big jump in his underlying numbers. And that was kind of, I remember Nate talking about how it seemed like fairly sustainable for Gaudreau to, if he had stayed in the same situation, to potentially be 100-point player year to year. So, yeah, I mean, it's not surprising that these numbers are coming down, right? Like he's again, he was playing on an island by himself, and for a guy that gets a lot of assists, if there's no one to pass the puck to, it's kind of hard to to be getting those assists. And even still, he had 53, so pretty great for him. I think Columbus is on the rise, and Gaudreau, I imagine, is probably going to get back to about 90 points. That would be my rough estimate. So even if he shoots his career average with the same shot totals as last season, he'd be up to 27 goals and 81 points. And then
Mhm.
I expect it to be higher than that. Like I think I expect probably about 90 points, just because I think Line A was hurt half the year last year. That's kind of his running mate, and when they played together, they played well. Um, I think they're going to have a little bit more center depth. Boone Jenner was unhealthy a lot of the year last year. He seemed to play pretty well with them. You also got Adam Fantilli coming into the mix. You've got Kent Johnson a little bit older. You've got Cole Sillinger a little bit older. There's just a really nice mix of players
Mm-hmm.
there.
Absolutely.
Young players that are really quality players. They also improved their defense, so that's
Significantly.
really great.
Yeah.
I think Damon Severson 5v5 is going to be really nice for them. I also think Zach Wierenski is back. That's like almost like an off-season acquisition, so that'll be huge for them, especially on the power play. So I really see Gaudreau being back to a premium point getter in the league next year. Obviously, the peripherals, he doesn't really do anything there, but I like Gaudreau going into next year. What do you think, Binksy?
I am like word for word in agreement with you here. I think that we can virtually depend on him in a not doesn't even need to be a great situation, just a good situation where things have not gone completely south the way that they did for the Blue Jackets last season, to be a 90-point player. And if things really take off for them, not outside of the realm of possibility that you're in the high 90s to even 100. Like if it goes really well for them, they improved on a team that was already primed to be much better before all of the injuries last year. So I am a huge believer in a return to form in Johnny Gaudreau, and I think you're going to get an excellent value for him in points league. And I think there's even room for you to get phenomenal value for him in a categories league if you're just purely drafting him for offensive prowess. And you know, I think it's really important to note that we're talking about a 74-point player on what was arguably the worst team in hockey for stretches of the season last year. Like, and that
Yep.
says quite a bit with the Ducks and the Coyotes being out there, right? Like that was a respectable season from him in the worst of all situations. And it should be much, much, much better in Columbus next year. And I completely agree, right? Like I think I don't know if the sky is the limit, but but the ceiling isn't the ceiling. I don't know what that means, but it sounds good to me in my head right now. So
Yeah, no, I'm feeling good about old Johnny Hockey. All right, and our number one guy. This is another one that's so unsurprising, similar to Ryan Nugent Hopkins, but it's our other 115 point player, Jonathan Huberdeau. Last year, he had 15 goals, 40 assists, and 55 points, which is his lowest point pace since 2015. That's insane. So he had his lowest IPP since 2014 at 64.71%. His shooting percentage was 11.9, which is a little low for him, not crazy low. He's usually like 13 and a half. On ice shooting percentage was his lowest since 2018, 9.84%. So that's low. Man, that's low for a top six player or a guy that's typically on PP1 playing on your top line. That's super, super low. That's crazy low. And then for a playmaker, it's even worse, right? Because the guys around you aren't putting the puck in the net. The previous year in Florida, it was over 14%. So, like, I don't think that this guy's a 115 point player perennially. I'm not saying that, but I mean, he's certainly better than 55 points. That's for sure. Time on ice was his lowest since 2015, 1651, and his lowest power play time on ice since 2017. His shots per 60 and individual Corsi 4 per 60 were both the lowest of his career and were a huge dip from last year. So, I mean, I chalk that up as someone being kind of unhappy in their situation. Like he was clearly disgruntled, really struggled to find a place in the lineup there. And Daryl Sutter just treated him like absolute dog shit.
God,
Playing him
what the
similarly
hell
to
was that about?
yeah, playing him on the third line, taking him off the top power play, just like not putting him in a position to succeed. So for a guy that's kind of you're kind of locked in as this guy being a cornerstone piece on this team for a long time, and you're just like not helping him out in any way, shape, or form. I just don't understand that at all. So, new coaching situation, that's great. I think you're going to see an increase in goal and point totals. Though I think, like I said, it's not going to be back up over 100 points, but it's going to be more closer to his career average, which is like a little bit above a point per game. I think Calgary as a team, similar to Florida last year, super unlucky. Just as a team, I think everyone stands to have some positive regression. I think the new coach is going to be a big help. And I think he's going to get back on that top power play, and that's going to be huge for him. So I'm pretty high on Jonathan Huberdeau having a huge bounce back, like potentially a 30-point bounce back this year after his 60-point decrease.
Yikes.
So we're gonna get kind of back to a nice little happy medium for Jonathan Huberdeau. What do you think, Binksy? How you feeling about old Johnny Hubes?
Well, I think the most important thing for me is that the coach has changed, right? Like you
Yeah,
mentioned, there is zero reason that he isn't the cornerstone franchise player. And I was really curious about first half and second half time on ice for him, and it was only a slight jump. Like it stayed around 17 minutes average, even though it fluctuated really wildly between 14 and 19 game to game.
yeah,
So I'm like, okay, so I'm looking over the game log and I'm like, how much of this, like of these like bumps in time on ice game to game were related to it going into overtime because they played and lost so many one goal games last
yeah,
year, so many games
mhm,
that went to OT, that went to shootout, right? Like a literal almost a quarter of their season was playing with extra minutes.
yeah,
So most of those games where his time on ice was noteworthy higher were in overtime and shootout loss games. So
yeah,
I think as much room for improvement in time on ice is there in the bare stats. There's even more of it based on the actual way that the games went. Like I just don't see why this player wouldn't come into this season and get 19 plus minutes a night, right? Or even 20, right? Like it just it didn't make sense to us all season long, and with a new coach coming in, it has to be better, right? It just has to be better, and a season in Calgary for him, a new situation management coaching wise, all of the indicators are positive. I sincerely believe that with that extra time on ice in a system that is going to be more geared towards him and his success, then it has to be a huge jump. And we don't really have to expect that to be 100 plus points, but for it to be a point per game pace, 85, 88 points seems like so reasonable, right? It seems so reasonable. And to track someone to get 30 more points in a season with virtually nothing changing on the team is really significant. Like if you're only losing to Foley and expecting a 30-point jump, then it's purely related to situation, and the situation is very, very different. So I have always been a believer in the talent of Huberdeau. Like he's just one of those players to watch for me. And I was flabbergasted all season long last year. Like I was a proponent of buying low because it just
yeah,
didn't make any sense, you know? So the metrics indicate that they should go back up. The situation indicates it should go back up. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that he is number one on our list. And even that being such an apparent thing, I seriously believe that it will be vastly improved in this coming season. Most important to me is that it was so bad and so stinky that you're going to get a huge value for Huberdeau in your drafts. Like,
Totally.
there's going to be a lot of lists where he's just automatically way lower than he should be.
Yep. 100%. 100%. I'm seeing, like, in the best ball drafts, he's going in like the 6th round on average. So you could get potentially really good value for Jonathan Huberdeau. All right, everybody. That's all we have for today. If you like our content, check out the Apples and Genos Patreon. You can support the show on a monthly basis and get extra perks in season, including access to the Apples and Genos Patron League, extra weekly waiver wire articles, and podcasts from Nate. There's also a temporary off-season tier for only $2 a month, where you can get early access to Nate's projections as he makes them. So you're going to want to check that out. Actually, right after we released the last podcast, he put out 5 or 6 more teams. So that was pretty fun to see. Kind of validated what I was saying. So thanks, Nate, for pumping those out. I think he's banging on all cylinders now. So those projections are going to be done in no time. Also, check out the Apples and Genos Discord server. It's super active right now. Everyone's getting really hyped. Shout outs to the band there for providing our music. There's Spotify links in the episode description. Give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Once again, get those ratings in. Send us screenshots. Binksy's just desperate to give away a jersey to somebody. So get those reviews in. Follow us on Twitter. Binksy's at Binklemania. Nate is at Apples Genos. Blake is at Blake Creamer AG. And I'm at Just Joshin41. Please practice safe stats and happy drafting. Have a good one, folks.
No curse words? I was
it's gotta be
it's gotta be organic.
It's gotta be a surprise. I need to leave some suspense, it doesn't have the same effect.
That's right. Way to keep it OG. Let's do it.
All right. Have a good one, guys.
Bye, everybody.